Okay, well, we're going to get started. We have some people coming in. That's okay. They'll join us when they get here. In the meantime, we're going to get started for our coffee and conversation quarterly edition. So first of all, I just want to welcome everybody. Hi, Cecile. How are
Hi,
you?
Elise. Good. How are you?
Good. So I will introduce myself. My name is Elise Finney, and I am a private wealth advisor and a certified divorce financial analyst professional for the firm Argent Bridge Advisors. Welcome to another edition of Coffee and Conversation for our quarterly conversation that we're going to be doing this year. Joining me today is Cecile Holt, who is a partner at Argent Bridge Advisors. She's also a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst professional and a private wealth advisor. So real quick about a little bit about our firm. We are our Argent Bridge Advisors. Our firm is a multi-family office financial planning firm. We're headquartered in Northern Virginia in the Tysons area, and we serve individuals and multi-generational families throughout the U.S. With that, let's go, Cecile.
Hi, everyone. We have a crowd today. So I'm so glad to be contributing to this conversation. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. In 2023, as a firm, we are committing to sharing experience, insights, and ideas for avoiding issues that may derail your successful long-term plan. From too good to be true offers to avoid to family meetings about money. We intend to share stories, offer resources, and hopefully provide a springboard for your own meaningful money conversations and decisions. We invite you to grab your favorite mug or maybe lunch at this time and join us for the next 45 minutes so we dive deeper into this quarter's topic, which is failure to launch financially independent children.
Yeah, and so Cecile just said it. This is all coffee and conversation, lunch and conversation, whatever you want to call it. It's really about for us to kind of just get the conversation going so that you can take it back into your own family, with your friends, with your children, with your spouse, with your neighbor, whoever, and just kind of keep the conversation going. So one of the things that we have been, kind of talking about this whole, failure to launch family and just, the topic of a lot of it stems about the uncomfortableness about talking about money in our own family. And we have found that there is this cultural shift, this cultural change that's happening and being fueled by social media. And it is all coming, and it doesn't matter what age you are, you're probably going to see something on TikTok or Instagram, and it's going to look like people walking up to strangers and saying, what do you do for a living? And how much do you make? And these people answer, and then they say, how much do you pay for rent? And can I have a tour of your apartment? And they take them for a tour of their apartment, and nice car. They park in front of fancy hotels and go up to people, nice car. What do you do for a living? And these are strangers sharing this, what we consider to be intimate information. And they're doing it in front of the whole world. And yet we can't even have these conversations in our own home. So how do we get this change, this shift to happen in our own home? Because really the ultimate goal is to have healthy relationships around money and conversations around money.
Right. It's so fascinating. And your children are watching TikTok. So it's probably best for them to learn from you as parental role models versus this random person on TikTok who's just basically having a phone and walking up to strangers. So as I said, I think the best recommendation to raise financially savvy kids is to be a role model yourself and having those open lines of communication with the whole family. Money, as Elise said, money tends to be a very taboo topic, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm not suggesting that you necessarily need to tell your children how much you make, how much your house is worth, and so on and so forth, but at least give them concepts and involve them in the conversation and some of the decisions. And you can start at a very young age. Elise and I were going back and forth about what we do with our children. It's slightly different because my kids are 6 and 8, hers are teenagers. So for me, I have to have these very basic conversations, but I'm trying to get my children to understand the concept of money and understand the concept of, if you the cost of things, and that if you're going to buy something, then that means that you may not be able to get something else. So an example I had from my daughters is from very early on, she loved Barbies, and Barbies were $10 at the time. So we would just say everything was X Barbies. So if something was $100, I was like, Chloe, do you realize that this is 10 Barbies? And so that way she was starting to start grasping the concept of money, and that things are worth something, and that you have to pay for things. So I think you can really start that at any age and tailor that conversation based on your children's understanding. And it's never too late to start either. And another thing to remember is, when you talk to your spouse or somebody else or another adult about money in the house, is watch how you're talking about money, and maybe avoid some of those tense conversations in front of the children, so that they don't get this odd relationship about money and thinking that something is wrong or you shouldn't talk about it. Or so if you have to have a difficult conversation with your spouse about money, maybe take it to another room. But that being said, try to bring back the kids once you've agreed on something, and talk about it openly. Your kids will read body language. If you're stressed, they'll be stressed. But try to involve them as much as possible.
Absolutely. And I love, Cecile, what you just mentioned about, all of this can be tailored to different ages. So it doesn't matter if you have an elementary school age student or a college student, or even just young adult in their 20s. All of this can be tailored. And, one of the things, and, it'll become more sophisticated. Maybe you're not talking about relating everything to Barbies, but as the child gets older, you're talking really, in terms of budgeting. And, in the beginning, it may be just taking them to the grocery store and letting them help you purchase a meal or a week's worth of groceries. That's really basic, like kind of really try to compartmentalize something and just do a small little piece of it. But by the time that they're in high school, you want to be talking about all of the things that go into running a household, so that when they are young adults and they're on their own, they're not surprised, oh my gosh, I have to pay for water. I didn't even know that, I had to pay for that. So one of the things when you're talking about budgeting, that's the word that tends to get used more often, but you really have to pair that with tracking, because it doesn't matter if you could budget all you want, but if you're not tracking it, that's the piece that really holds you accountable. And without the two, it's pointless. So no one likes to budget. Adults don't like to budget. It's time consuming in the beginning, but once it's done, and you only have to go back and kind of review it once a year and make some little tweaks. And you don't have to share every detail. Like, you don't have to share how much your mortgage is, but kids can go online. Adults, they know how, or young adults, they know how much all these subscriptions cost and things like that. So you can really kind of get it detailed and let them be a part of it. You want to really talk to them about prioritizing spending, especially with younger children. If you use the words, if I'm just remembering one time purchasing something, and I'm sure I did this with my own kids, but try to kind of steer clear of not saying that you can't afford something, because, chances are you could afford that. And if you tell a child, I don't want to purchase that, I can't afford it, they have a fear in them, a scarcity. And we don't want to put that into children. So we want it to be, well, that's something I'm not choosing to spend on today. That's a priority for me. I rather prioritize spending and saving, or saving over spending for that particular item. So all about abundant thinking. That's what we are here about at Argent Bridge Advisors. And it's not always about cutting expenses. It might be about increasing income. So that's definitely something that you want to be talking to children about, different ways that you can earn more income and have a more abundant way of thinking.
I love everything you said about prioritizing, because it applies to adults too. It's all about prioritizing what makes you happy, and that answer is different for everybody. So teaching children early on how to prioritize their spending is so important. And also that when you think of a budget, there's a plus side to that equation, and they can certainly learn to make a little bit of money early, and it'll carry on once they start graduating and having their own income. And I think that's a good transition to, once they do start earning money, it's never too early to teach them how to invest that money. Of course, you can always open a bank account for them and have a little savings account and see them incrementally earning a little bit more. But if you can open an investment account and also get them involved in those decisions early, it's so important. It's never too early to learn, and it's almost like a language. It's a lot easier to learn once you're young versus trying to learn it later.
Yeah.
So open a savings account, but also open an investment account. And that's where you can bring us in as a resource, as much as I say, keep communication open. If you're not comfortable discussing a concept and you want to bring in a professional, we're more than happy to come in and start talking about the basics of investing with children without overwhelming them or without making it overly complex. It does not have to be, but I think it is never too early to have that conversation. And that brings me to the meat of the topic today of, we've been talking about all the things you can do to bring up financially savvy children, but what happens when your kids are already 18 to 24 and beyond, and quote unquote fail to launch. And I know, Elise, you pulled a lot of stats on that, and that's fascinating to me about how many kids and young adults and adults are still supported by their parents. Do you mind sharing a little bit?
Yeah, it was actually fascinating to me. I really didn't know what the numbers were. So kind of just a quick little search on a few different websites looking at studies. And one of the ones recently done is called through savings.com, where 45% of parents are still covering costs for their adult children. And it's averaging the money coming into the kids about $1,400 a month. And then other studies were saying that is actually quite low. I was seeing other studies that was well over 50%. So that really surprised me, causing inflation and soaring housing costs is kind of one of those reasons. But when I kind of got into the levels of the ages, this is going from like 18 and plus. So surprise, no surprise, obviously 18-year-olds, even big numbers, 20 to 24-year-olds at 52%. But the numbers that really jumped out on the page to me was ages 25 to 29, and this is 17%. And then the really crazy ones are over 38% to 30 to 34, and then 11% still being helped by their parents at over age 35.
Wow.
Derail your own retirement, your own savings.
That is fascinating. And I think that explains why we get so many clients asking us those questions, right? How do I help getting my child to be financially independent, and how much help is too much help, and what's the right amount? And I think that first and foremost is, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, kind of like when you're in a plane. First and foremost, make sure that whatever you do to help, you can afford. But we're going to be talking about it, even if you can afford it. It's all about supporting, but not enabling. So we'll definitely talk about this a lot more, but this could certainly derail some of your plans, again, from a financial perspective, but also from a lifestyle perspective. We have clients who had planned on traveling and maybe downsizing and not having the burden of such a big house anymore because they thought they were not going to need as many bedrooms and so on and so forth. So, having kids moving back in or needing to support kids can certainly be kind of a curveball thrown into your long-term plan. So we really want to spend a few minutes arming you with some tools that you can use to help your kids become more educated about finances and more empowered about their own financial decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we were talking about were, families, what are like kind of more ultra high net worth families. And, having this ability to understand their impact and responsibility of wealth, that we're talking about multi-generational wealth that will be passed down, how to be a good steward of this responsibility, of this wealth that's going to come into their hands someday. One of the things that could be done is to make collective decisions when you're thinking about giving money to charity. So involve your children, involve your grandchildren. If this is money that they're going to be managing someday in a foundation, you want to talk to them about that and say, this is what's important to our family. This is what we've done in the past. Some families even come up with a family mission statement. So that will guide them in these decisions. And they'll, again, come up with this decision, this mission statement collectively. For the younger children, or really any age, you could give them a dollar amount. You could say, you know what, for this donation of 5 or 10,000 or 1,000 or whatever it is, we want you to kind of research some of the things that you would like, that you find important, that you would like to give for charity, then come back to the family, have another family meeting, have a presentation, so that you are kind of all, again, collectively making these decisions together and keeping in line with the family values. So I think that's really a great thing you could do with money, and even money, or even something that's not going to be as high scale as necessarily a foundation, even small amounts. Again, this is family decisions and gets that conversation going with your kids.
Right. Thanks, Elise, for touching on that. I want to pivot a little bit and start talking, we
Sure.
were talking about, how to deal with multi-generational wealth, et cetera, but now pivoting to what happens when you end up with a new basement tenant. I think we've all heard the story of a child coming back after
You might have even been a basement tenant one day.
I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong, by the way, for a child to go back and stay at home for a year or two and save money. Like, absolutely not. But you also don't want it to become a thing that is permanent. So whether your children move back in for a year or two or more, I think there are some things that you can implement now and help them out with. So, again, whether you need the help or not, whether it's a financial decision or not, I always encourage parents to charge rent, even if that means that the rent goes into a savings account for the child's benefit. Because that way, it'll, once they're ready to move out, it'll be their own little nest egg. Hopefully they can invest that, and that can grow and that can be ready. And it's also discipline, because once they move out of your basement, or their own bedroom, then they're going to need to start paying rent and face the real world. So I think the discipline aspect of it helps, again, whether you need it financially or not. It's about supporting and not enabling children, because it's a very slippery slope to be almost too helpful, that even young adults and children don't learn how to handle their own money, and then they end up being in that 45% category that still receive help from their parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it starts at home between you and your spouse if you're married. But I think if you are married and if you are raising children together, it is so important to be on the same page. We have had clients come to us, saying that the child was basically using mom against dad or dad against mom. And if they get a no from one, then they'll go to the other and get a yes from the other. And that's very unhealthy. So first and foremost, talk to each other, talk to your partner, to your spouse about it, how you want to handle things. Even if you're divorced, actually, that's worth a conversation with an ex and talking about how you want to handle the situation, so that you're not pinned against one another. And also discuss the expectation. It's so important to set boundaries and expectations and saying, hey, it's okay for you to stay here for a year. We welcome you. We love having you here. But what's your plan? Once either you get a job or you get a better job, how long will you be here? When will you move out? And again, already starting that savings pattern as though they're paying rent. So communication and expectations are key here.
Absolutely. So one of the things you kind of mentioned, if they were to, what would it feel like to, if they were to pay their own rent while they're still living in your basement. So one of the things my husband and I did, and you could do this.
I love this example. Thank you for sharing.
I'm going to start calling it, we just talked about it yesterday. I'm going to start calling it scaling up. I don't know. Maybe we'll think of a new name for it, but it's a practice my husband and I did when we were trying to save up to purchase our house. So we were living in a townhouse, we were paying rent, and I kind of, based on what we thought we were going to buy for a house, how much we thought the mortgage would wind up being. And I wanted to see what it felt like to not have that money in my everyday bank account. So I wanted to put it aside. And I really suggest that, and this is what we did, we opened up a new account, we put it in a dedicated space because we didn't want it to just kind of lump it into all of our other savings, because we really wanted to prove it to ourselves. So we had to know that we weren't saying, oh, we're putting in this money, but then something else kind of doesn't happen. So we really wanted just to prove it to ourselves, put it in something dedicated and see what it felt like to to live that way. And you could do this at any age. If you're purchasing a car, you haven't been in a car payment, and all of a sudden, you're going to be in a $500 or $600 a month car payment, same thing, put that money aside, see what it feels like to not have that money every month. And that will help you, build up that down payment on the house or down payment on the car, or whatever that is. And it's important for kids to understand that when they move out of your basement, that they're going to have these expenses. And can they prove it to themselves? Because the worst thing is that they move out and 6 months later
You're back, right?
And then they're back. So.
Yeah, it's about building those healthy financial habits and test their expectations too. If they have a plan, don't feel afraid to challenge them and say, well, is that realistic? Like, let's start writing this down and making sure that it makes sense. So
yeah.
And that's another tool for launching is do go through this homework of, once you're on your own, how much is rent going to cost? Lise was mentioning all of these expenses. I think sometimes kids think of their discretionary spending as the funds money that they want to spend, but they forget about the day-to-day bills that they will have, like utilities and gas and food and all of the above. Discretionary spending comes second, but they have to think about all of the things that they're going to have to spend money on. And so you can certainly have family meetings and talk about this. And once again, feel free to use this as a resource for any time that you start being uncomfortable with that conversation. There are certainly professionals who can help, and we do this all the time where we're happy to be brought in and kind of be the expert and the moderator. If it's more day-to-day budgeting expenses, there are also resources and people that can help with, or even software at this point that can help with the budgeting, but we can certainly help with some of the bigger picture conversations, and also have the children understand the impact of their own expenses on yours. Again, it's completely okay to have this open conversation. And sometimes, where people don't often think about this, but when it comes more, when the conversation is really awkward, it is very difficult to talk about it. There's also financial therapists that can be involved, especially when a husband and wife can't agree, or two partners can't agree on those decisions. Then that's worth bringing a financial therapist and start talking about those deeper money associations and what might create a conflict. So just food for thought, broaden your team of expert as needed, but certainly don't be afraid to reach out if you start feeling uncomfortable about those conversations yourself.
Yeah. I know one thing that a financial therapist will absolutely say is, again, just having those clear expectations of what you're willing to do. And even after the child launches, let's say they're now in their 20s and they're living on their own. Again, we're parents. It's our natural inclination to want to still help them. And even as a daughter, still, and I were talking about this, we're sometimes the receivers of this too, as our parents are still alive. So, again, I think that from the person who's receiving it, I know from, my dad, if he's going to do a family vacation, he's very clear about, before we go on family vacation, like, I'm going to pay for the house rental, but you're on your own for airfare or food or whatever it is. So again, just being really, really clear about what you're willing to pay for. Maybe, your child has bought a new car and you're willing to, that's great. But I'm going to pay for car insurance, but I'm only going to do it for 1 year, so that they are prepared. Maybe parents are willing to pay for a trip for the children and grandchildren to come visit them. So again, just, putting those clear expectations out there. And then one thing to always kind of consider, and, again, family dynamics are always different in this, but, if you have multiple children, always kind of just consider, the feelings and fairness to these children, how that's going to be perceived. And, you know, again, this is personal and individual to different family dynamics, but just be aware that sometimes that's an issue that comes up.
Yes, and when it comes up, it can be pretty ugly. So I'm glad you're bringing this up, because we have seen it, we have heard it, and sometimes it's not a big deal, especially when it's $100 here or there. But when it's a meaningful, prolonged assistance to a child, is, and when I say child, is more like an adult, actually, somebody maybe in their 40s who lost their job and needed help for a while and got meaningful gifts from a parent. That can certainly create a lot of strain on the family dynamics between siblings. And there are ways of handling this. And of course, it's your money, so you decide what to do with it. But we're just warning you of situation that may arise. So if fairness is important to you and you want to make sure that you give the same amount of money to your children, we always say you can always resolve this on the back end, meaning through your estate plan, and maybe leave, you know, deduct some of the lifetime contributions that you've made to one child from their inheritance, and leave a little more to the siblings in your will, something like that. Again, it's every situation is different, and we are not meaning to tell you what to do, but we're just suggesting that you do have these conversations openly, so that it's all in the open, and you don't have there's no unintended consequences from your generosity.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't think we were planning on speaking about this, Elise, but I actually had a question this week that just came to mind, where sometimes clients parents want to be generous, but a child refuses the gift. And that's an interesting dynamic too. So also there, you can be very specific. You know, a child might not necessarily agree to receive $16,000, you know, or something like that, but you could say, hey, this is, it might be easier to say, hey, I'm paying for the family vacation, or I'm paying for this car for you, I'm paying for something, or this came from the inheritance from grandpa, or this was my required distribution from grandma. She would have liked for you to have it. So there are ways to handle these kind of things in a more delicate manner, because on the flip side of failure to launch, there's also those children who are very proud to be on their own, but maybe could use a little bit of help. And it's certainly more fun to give with a warm hand than not. So again, it's all about communication one way or another. One thing we didn't talk about, you know, here we were talking about failure to launch as more of a I hesitate to say choice, but we are fully aware that sometimes it's also, you know, disability may create a need that's more permanent, and that's certainly not avoidable. So this could be a webinar in itself, and involves very, very complex planning. I'm only going to spend a couple of minutes there. But basically, if a child is not able to have their own income, or able to keep a job or something like that, there are certainly, again, the more planning early on you do, the better, but it's also never too late. But in this case, you definitely want to involve an estate attorney, and have some special needs trust put in place, potentially guardianship, and all this becomes very difficult. We have gone through it with several clients, and sometimes the child is not even willing to say that they have a disability or they can't handle their own money. So it becomes tough to put in a guardianship. But all that planning becomes very necessary, because the parents can ultimately be financially responsible. And the other consideration there is, it's not only support during your lifetime, but you may want to put in place support beyond your own lifetime, right? What happens when you and the other parent passes? That's where there might be a need for life insurance of, you know, when something happens to you, then there's a little bit of a legacy left for your child. So, you know, things to think about. And things that may involve a lot more planning, and may require you to broaden your team of experts even more. But again, you can always come to us with those kind of issues, and we're more than happy to coordinate those efforts and put you in touch with the right professionals.
Yeah.
Wow, we're
We're kind of getting down to it, and I'd love
Yeah.
to see some questions. I didn't offer that in the beginning, but if anyone has any questions, please pop that into the Q&A and we'll get to that. So while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I'll just let you know that these coffee and conversations that we're doing each month or each quarter, the next one will be in August, and it's titled Millennials, What You Wish Your Parents Told You. So we're going to kind of get the flip side of it, and we really welcome you to join us for that. That will be kind of more just us offering perspectives, addressing questions from the younger generation. So hopefully you can join us in August. We'll get that invitation out soon. So didn't see any questions coming in. I don't know. Is there any final thoughts for you, Cecile?
I would say when we come in and offer to have family conversations about money, I just want to make it clear that everything remains confidential. We will share as much or as little as you want us to share with your children. Sometimes we only share concepts. Sometimes we only share, overall numbers. Sometimes we dig in. So it's really up to your preference, but just know that privacy is very important to us, and we'll only share what you're comfortable with sharing.
Absolutely. So quiet group today, but a nice size. We appreciate you attending today. That really kind of concludes our time here, and just really want to thank you for joining us. Please reach out. Again, this is all about keeping the conversation going. So hopefully you will take this to your friends, your family, your children, your spouse, whoever in your life that you feel that you could that can really benefit from this. So we will get the recording out, and if there's something that comes up that you want to reach out to us, please do, and then share it with your friends. So hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Elise.